I was receiving $8,000 a month, yet I was standing in my own kitchen wondering if I was allowed to eat. My daughter-in-law controlled every dollar of my pension while I lost nearly 30 pounds and told myself it was just aging. The worst part was not the hunger. It was watching my own son look away. I had worked my entire life to be independent, only to find myself asking permission to buy milk in the house I owned. I did not realize I was being erased until my daughter walked in and saw what I could no longer deny. Before we step into today's story, drop a quick comment and let us know where you're joining us from. We're always amazed by how these stories connect people across different cultures and places. Your voice in the comments keeps this community alive, so don't hold back. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll always be the first to catch our latest tales. Now, sit back, relax, and get ready for a journey that might just change the way you see things. Let's dive in. My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 71 years old, and until a few years ago, I believed I understood what security meant. I live in Sugar Land, Texas, in the same two-story brick house my husband and I bought in 1987. I spent more than 30 years working as a human resources manager for a large energy corporation in Houston. I handled contracts, compliance, benefits, retirement structures. I understood numbers. I understood policies. When my husband died suddenly from a stroke, I believed at least one thing was certain. I would never be a burden to anyone. My pension was $8,000 a month. It was steady, reliable, earned. After the funeral, the house felt enormous. The staircase echoed differently. The kitchen clock ticked too loudly. My son Daniel suggested that he and his wife Lauren move in so I would not be alone. It sounded practical. In Texas, family takes care of family. I told myself I was fortunate. Many women my age sit in quiet houses with no one to check on them. I would not be one of them. At first, Lauren seemed organized and efficient. She reorganized the pantry, labeled storage bins in the garage, scheduled maintenance for the air conditioning system. She told friends she was grateful for the chance to look after Mom. I let her take over small things. Grief made decisions heavy. When she offered to help manage my monthly bills, because she said online banking could be confusing, I did not argue. I handed her my debit card with relief, not suspicion. The first shift was so small I almost missed it. I began asking for cash instead of withdrawing it myself. Lauren would say, "How much do you need?" in a tone that sounded helpful but felt measured. I told myself she was simply being careful. After all, she was part of the household now. The thermostat became the next quiet change. One afternoon, I noticed the house felt cooler than usual. The display read 60 degrees Fahrenheit. When I reached to adjust it, I found a small plastic lock over the controls. Lauren said cooler air was better for older people and helped with inflammation. I accepted that explanation, even when my hands stiffened from cold. I wore 2 sweaters inside, then 3. I told myself I must be more sensitive now. Food shifted more slowly. Grocery shopping became Lauren's domain. Portions grew smaller. She mentioned that seniors did not require as many calories. I laughed along with her and said I was probably eating too much anyway. I did not question why the pantry shelves thinned near the end of each month when my pension had already been deposited. Daniel avoided conflict the way he always had. If Lauren spoke sharply, he stayed silent. If I hesitated before opening the refrigerator, he pretended not to notice. I began to doubt my own instincts. Perhaps I was forgetting things. Perhaps I had agreed to arrangements I could not recall clearly. My clothes grew looser. I stopped driving to church because I felt tired more often. The house I had filled with birthday parties and Thanksgiving dinners began to feel strangely monitored, as if every cabinet and drawer belonged to someone else. Nothing dramatic happened. No shouting, no slammed doors, only a gradual shrinking of my space. By the end of that winter, I was living in my own home, receiving $8,000 every month and asking permission to buy a carton of milk. If you are still watching and you can already sense that something is not right inside that house, comment number 1 below, so I know you feel it too. What happened next made the cold feel like the least of my problems. Now let us move on to chapter 2. Memorial Day weekend arrived wrapped in the thick Texas heat that always settles over Sugar Land before summer fully declares itself. Outside, the air shimmered above the pavement and cicadas hummed from the trees. Inside my house, it felt like early winter. The thermostat remained locked at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and I wore a cardigan over 2 long-sleeve shirts while arranging flowers on the dining table no one used anymore. Rebecca's car pulled into the driveway just before noon. She had mentioned visiting sometime that weekend, but I had not expected her so early. When she stepped through the door, sunlight followed her in, warm and bright against the cold air inside. She wrapped her arms around me, and I felt her hesitate. The embrace lasted a second longer than usual. I could almost sense her measuring the bones beneath my sweater. "You feel lighter," she said quietly. I laughed and told her I had been trying to eat healthier. The words sounded rehearsed, though I had never practiced them. While I made coffee, Rebecca wandered into the kitchen as if it were still her childhood home. She opened the refrigerator door casually, the way daughters do when they are comfortable. The light spilled across nearly empty shelves: a carton of almond milk, half a jar of mustard, 2 soft tomatoes, and a container of lettuce that had begun to brown at the edges. Rebecca did not say anything at first. She simply stared. I felt heat rise to my face despite the cold house. I told her Lauren had not gone grocery shopping yet. It sounded flimsy even to me. Rebecca crouched and tugged at the freezer handle. It did not open. She straightened slowly and ran her fingers over the small metal clasp and padlock fixed to the outside. The lock was silver and practical, like something you would find on a storage shed. "Why is this locked?" she asked. Lauren answered from the hallway before I could. She explained that it was easier to manage portions that way, that seniors often overestimated how much protein they needed. Her tone was calm, instructional, almost clinical. Standing there, I felt less like the homeowner and more like a case study. Daniel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes fixed somewhere near the floor. He did not add anything. Rebecca moved toward the stack of mail on the counter. A bright orange notice caught her attention. She picked it up and scanned the page. The electric bill was marked overdue. I opened my mouth to explain, but the words tangled. I had assumed everything was being handled automatically. After all, my pension was deposited at the beginning of every month without fail. Rebecca looked at me instead of at Lauren when she asked, "Do you still manage your own accounts?" For a moment, I could not remember the last time I logged into my bank portal. Lauren had offered to streamline everything. It had seemed efficient, even thoughtful. I felt myself searching for an answer that would not embarrass anyone. That night, Rebecca sat at the edge of my bed, the lamplight casting soft shadows against the wall. She studied my face the way nurses do, taking in details others overlook. She touched my wrist gently, her thumb resting against the bone that had grown sharper over the past year. "Mom, are you really in control of your pension?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question lingered between us, heavier than any accusation. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I realized I did not know which accounts my $8,000 were entering or who was moving it afterward. I had trusted that it was simply being managed. Lying awake after she left the room, I replayed the past months in my mind: the locked thermostat, the the smaller meals, the cash I requested instead of withdrew. Daniel's silence felt louder now, amplified by Rebecca's steady gaze. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a possibility I had been avoiding. I did not know where my own money was. If you are still here, and that locked freezer raised as many questions for you as it did for my daughter, comment number 2 below and stay with me. The truth we uncovered at the hospital changed everything. Let us move on to chapter 3. Rebecca did not argue with me the next morning. She simply packed a small suitcase and told Daniel she was taking me to Austin for a few days so I could rest. Lauren's smile tightened at the corners, but she said nothing more than that it was probably a good idea. Daniel stood in the driveway with his hands in his pockets, watching us load the car. He did not try to stop me. The drive to Austin felt longer than usual. The highway stretched out beneath a pale sky, and I found myself dozing in and out of sleep. Twice I woke with a dull ache behind my eyes and a strange lightness in my limbs, as if my body were made of paper instead of bone and muscle. Rebecca kept glancing at me, her nurse's instinct always on alert, though she kept her tone calm and conversational. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Blood was drawn. My weight was recorded. I stepped onto the scale and avoided looking down, but Rebecca did. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Nearly 30 pounds gone in 7 months. I had told myself the loss was gradual, harmless, perhaps even healthy. The doctor did not agree. He explained that my protein levels were dangerously low and that early muscle wasting had begun. He spoke carefully, choosing words that did not accuse, but did not soften the truth either. I listened, without fully absorbing it. Part of me remained suspended outside the room, as if this frail woman being discussed could not possibly be me. Yet, when I flexed my fingers, I felt the weakness in my grip. When I stood, I felt the faint tremor in my knees. Rebecca's composure shifted first. I saw it in her eyes. This was no longer a vague concern about aging. It was measurable harm. In the quiet hallway after the appointment, she placed her hand over mine and did not speak for a long moment. I understood that silence more than any lecture. That evening, while I rested in her guest room, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. I could hear the soft clicking of keys. She began looking through Lauren's public social media accounts, something she had not bothered to do before. Lauren's profile was filled with filtered images of home-cooked meals, inspirational quotes about caregiving, and photographs of me smiling on the patio with a blanket over my shoulders. The captions described devotion, sacrifice, love. Rebecca clicked deeper and found a fundraising page. The title read, "Support medical care for my brave mother-in-law." The description claimed I was battling serious health complications and that mounting medical expenses required community help. $37,000 had been raised over several months. Comments from strangers expressed sympathy and prayers. I stared at the screen, as if it were displaying someone else's name. I had never agreed to any fundraiser. I had never seen those donations. My medical expenses had been covered by insurance and my pension. The photographs used on the page were taken on days I remembered clearly. I had been told they were just family snapshots. Humiliation spread through me more quickly than anger. My weakness had been packaged and presented to the world for profit. Rebecca closed the laptop slowly and looked at me. "This is not just poor management," she said, her voice steady but firm. I felt something inside me shift, fragile but undeniable. The cold house, the locked freezer, the shrinking portions of food, the questions about my memory. They were no longer isolated inconveniences. They formed a pattern. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that what had been happening under my own roof was not care. It was control. and control had begun to cost me more than weight. If you are still watching and you felt the shock of that online fundraiser, comment number 3 below to let me know you are paying attention. What we found in the financial records was even more disturbing. Now, let us move on to Chapter 4. Rebecca did not allow the discovery of the fundraiser to sit idle. The next morning, she made a phone call from her kitchen while I sat at the table pretending to read the newspaper. She spoke with calm precision, explaining that she believed her mother might be the victim of financial exploitation. By afternoon, we were driving to Houston to meet an attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases. The office was located in a modest brick building near downtown. It smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee. The attorney, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a steady voice, listened without interrupting while Rebecca outlined everything: the weight loss, the locked freezer, the online fundraiser. When she turned to me and asked whether I still had access to my bank accounts, I hesitated. I realized I did not know my own passwords anymore. Lauren had said she would handle the technical details, so I would not have to worry. That admission seemed to shift the air in the room. Within days, formal requests were sent to retrieve my financial records. When the documents arrived, they were thicker than I expected. The attorney spread them across the conference table and began highlighting transfers. Over 3 years, more than $240,000 had been moved from my pension deposits into external accounts. The transfers were consistent, methodical, often occurring within days of each monthly deposit. The receiving accounts were connected to Lauren. Rebecca did not speak while the attorney traced the pattern. I watched the columns of numbers as if they were written in a foreign language. Each transaction felt like a small incision I had never felt being made. The next discovery came from property records. A rental home in Galveston had been purchased 18 months earlier. The down payment aligned precisely with several large withdrawals from my account. The deed listed Daniel and Lauren as sole owners. I had never been told about the purchase. I had certainly never agreed to finance it. I felt something tighten in my chest that had nothing to do with age. Then the attorney produced another document, a quitclaim deed transferring partial ownership of my Sugarland house to Daniel. My signature appeared at the bottom. It looked like mine at first glance, but when I leaned closer, the loops of the letters seemed slightly heavier, slightly forced. "I do not remember signing this," I said quietly. The attorney asked for the date. Rebecca pulled up my medical calendar on her phone. The signature was dated the same day I underwent a colonoscopy procedure at a surgical center in Houston. Medical records confirmed that I had been under anesthesia during the hours the document was notarized. The room fell silent. Legally, I had not been capable of understanding or consenting to any contract while sedated. The implication settled slowly but firmly. This was not careless bookkeeping. It was intentional. Someone had used a moment of physical vulnerability to secure control over my home. Rebecca's face changed then. The shock gave way to focus. She began asking precise questions about fraud statutes and forgery charges. The attorney outlined potential claims: financial exploitation, fraudulent transfer, document falsification. Each term felt clinical, but beneath them lay something deeply personal. I sat back in the chair, overwhelmed by the realization that the gradual erosion of my independence had been deliberate. The locked thermostat, the smaller meals, the controlled access to money. None of it had been accidental. It had been preparation. For years, I had believed I was protected by family. Now, I understood that my trust had been the very thing used against me. As we left the office, Rebecca placed her arm around my shoulders. I felt fear rising, but beneath it something else was forming. Not denial this time. Clarity. Whatever came next would not be a quiet conversation in my kitchen. It would be a reckoning. If you are still with me and you realize this was never just about money, comment number 4 below. The confrontation that followed shattered whatever illusions were left. Let us move on to Chapter 5. Returning to Sugarland felt different this time. The house looked the same from the outside, brick steady under the late afternoon sun, but I no longer saw it as shelter. I saw it as evidence. Rebecca carried a leather folder under her arm as we stepped inside. Lauren was seated at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone. Daniel looked up from the living room sofa, surprised but not yet wary. Rebecca did not waste time with pleasantries. She asked them both to sit down. Her voice was calm, almost clinical, the way I had heard it when she once explained a medical chart to a patient's family. She placed the folder on the coffee table and began laying out documents in neat rows. The first set were bank statements. She walked through the numbers slowly, tracing the monthly pension deposits and the immediate transfers that followed. $240,000 over 3 years. The pattern was unmistakable. Each withdrawal was timed with precision, rarely exceeding a threshold that would trigger automatic alerts. Lauren leaned back, crossing her arms. She said the money had been used for household expenses and improvements. Her tone was steady, as though she had rehearsed the defense. Rebecca did not raise her voice. She simply turned another page and pointed to an account number that did not belong to any shared household account. Daniel shifted in his seat. I watched him as much as I watched the papers. His eyes moved from the numbers to Lauren's face, searching for reassurance. Rebecca then placed a property record on the table. The Galveston rental house. She explained how the down payment corresponded exactly with several large transfers from my pension. The deed listed only Daniel and Lauren as owners. I had not known the property existed. I had never signed anything authorizing the use of my retirement funds for investment. Daniel's jaw tightened. He asked Lauren when the purchase had been finalized. She answered quickly, but her explanation did not include me. Rebecca slid the quitclaim deed forward next. My signature was printed at the bottom, heavy and uneven. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the thermostat. Rebecca calmly explained the date on the document matched the day I underwent a colonoscopy under anesthesia. Medical records confirmed I had been sedated at the time the deed was notarized. Lauren's expression hardened. She said paperwork sometimes needed to be completed efficiently, and that I had agreed beforehand. I searched my memory, but all I could recall from that day was waking to fluorescent lights and a nurse offering water. Rebecca's final set of documents were printed search records. She read them aloud without emphasis. Inheritance tax timeline in Texas, elderly survival with low protein intake, transfer deed without probate. The room seemed to shrink around us. Lauren dismissed the searches as general research. Daniel did not respond immediately. Instead, he stared at the papers as if they might rearrange themselves into something less damning. I sat very still, aware that the confrontation had moved beyond explanation. For months I had doubted my instincts. Now the evidence lay across my own coffee table. Rebecca spoke once more, her tone steady but unmistakably firm. This was not caregiving. This was control. Daniel finally looked at Lauren with something I had not seen before: uncertainty. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. I felt grief rise in my throat, not only for the money or the property, but for the moment I realized my son was seeing his wife clearly for the first time. Nothing was resolved that afternoon. No apology came, no confession followed, but the illusion had fractured. The truth, once spoken aloud in my own living room, could not be gathered back up and hidden. The storm had finally broken. After the confrontation in my living room, the house no longer felt livable. Daniel and Lauren moved through the rooms carefully, speaking in low tones behind closed doors. Rebecca did not argue with them again. Instead, she contacted the attorney and authorized the filing of formal complaints. Civil claims were submitted for financial exploitation and fraudulent transfer of property. Criminal allegations followed soon after: forgery, wire fraud connected to the online fundraiser, and unlawful use of my pension funds. When investigators uncovered the life insurance policy, the situation shifted from betrayal to something colder. The policy was valued at $750,000. The beneficiary was a limited liability company formed by Daniel months earlier. I had never applied for such a policy, never met with an agent, never agreed to medical underwriting beyond routine care. Yet there it was, bearing my name. The prosecutor explained that the policy, combined with financial depletion and nutritional neglect, suggested intent beyond convenience. In the weeks leading to trial, Daniel withdrew from Lauren. He stopped defending her publicly. He met privately with his own counsel. I did not ask what they discussed. I focused on rebuilding my strength, eating 3 full meals a day under Rebecca's watchful eye. Even so, I lay awake at night wondering where my responsibility ended and my son's began. I had raised him. I had trusted him. The courtroom in Houston was quiet on the first morning of proceedings. The fluorescent lights cast everything in flat tones. I sat behind the prosecutor's table, hands folded in my lap. I did not want spectacle. I wanted clarity. The evidence unfolded methodically. Bank records traced the $240,000 siphoned from my pension. Property documents demonstrated the Galveston purchase funded by those transfers. Medical testimony confirmed that I was under anesthesia when the quitclaim deed was executed. A forensic specialist explained the fundraiser misrepresentations and the transfer of donated funds into Lauren's personal account. Then came the insurance policy. The prosecution presented corporate filings showing Daniel as the registered organizer of the limited liability company. The timing of the policy application aligned closely with the largest withdrawals from my accounts. The implication was undeniable. Daniel took the stand midway through the trial. He looked older than I remembered, as if the weight of weeks had pressed against his shoulders. He testified that Lauren had handled most financial details, but he admitted he signed corporate documents without fully questioning their purpose. He acknowledged seeing changes in my health and choosing to believe explanations rather than confront them. He did not claim innocence. He claimed weakness. I watched him while he spoke. A part of me wanted to shield him from the consequences of his own passivity, but another part understood that silence had enabled what happened to me. Accountability could not be selective. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days. Lauren was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and forgery. The judge sentenced her to 6 years in state prison and ordered full restitution, including the funds raised through the online campaign. The insurance policy was voided. The fraudulent deed was rescinded. There was no applause, no visible collapse. Lauren stood motionless as the sentence was read. Daniel lowered his head. As we left the courthouse, Rebecca slipped her hand into mine. I did not feel victorious. I felt something closer to finality. Justice had drawn a line that my family had refused to draw for itself. Some chapters end quietly. This one ended in a courtroom, with my son standing on one side of the line and me on the other. If you are still watching after that courtroom moment, comment number 6 below so I know you are standing with me. But the verdict was not the end of the story. The real consequences began at home. Let us move on to Chapter 7. After the trial, the house in Sugarland felt stripped of noise. Lauren was gone, transferred to a state facility to begin serving her sentence. Daniel remained for a short time, moving through the rooms as if unsure whether he belonged there anymore. The air inside the house was warmer now. The thermostat lock had been removed, yet the warmth did not reach every corner. Within weeks, Daniel filed for divorce. I learned about it not from him, but from court notices forwarded by my attorney. The finality of it settled quietly. What had begun as loyalty had ended in exposure. Neighbors, who once waved politely, now looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. News traveled fast in suburban communities, even when no one spoke directly about it. Daniel asked to meet one afternoon. He arrived alone, standing on the porch with his shoulders slightly hunched, as though bracing against a wind that was not there. I invited him inside. We sat across from each other at the dining table that had once hosted birthday cakes and holiday meals. He did not begin with excuses. He said he had been wrong. He admitted that he noticed changes in my health long before Rebecca confronted them. He remembered the colder rooms, the smaller meals, the way I hesitated before asking for money. He chose to believe Lauren's explanations because it was easier than challenging them. He called it weakness. I heard something closer to avoidance. As he spoke, memories layered over the man sitting in front of me. I saw the little boy who once held my hand crossing busy streets. I remembered school plays and late-night fevers. Love does not vanish simply because trust fractures, but love alone cannot repair what silence allowed. I told him calmly that he had seen what was happening. He had seen me shrinking in my own home and decided comfort mattered more than confrontation. I did not raise my voice. Anger would have been simpler. Clarity required restraint. Daniel lowered his head and said he understood. He did not blame Lauren entirely. He acknowledged signing documents without reading them carefully. He admitted that he liked the idea of financial growth without considering the source. Hearing that hurt more than any accusation could have. I did not sever our relationship that day. Cutting him off completely would have felt like erasing decades of shared history. But I drew lines that could not be crossed again. I told him he would never have access to my accounts or property decisions. My finances were now protected through legal structures that required oversight beyond family ties. Then I outlined the conditions for rebuilding any kind of trust. He would complete 200 hours volunteering at a senior support center in Houston, working directly with elderly individuals navigating financial systems. He would attend family counseling with me and Rebecca, and he would accept that rebuilding trust would take years, not weeks. Daniel listened without argument. He said he would do whatever was required. His voice carried exhaustion more than defiance. When he left, I stood at the doorway and watched him walk to his car. The distance between us felt real, but not insurmountable. Boundaries are not punishments. They are safeguards. For the first time since the trial, I felt something close to equilibrium. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just the beginning of accountability. Strength, I realized, does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it is simply the decision to say no, even when your heart remembers saying yes. In the weeks after I set boundaries with Daniel, my life began to feel steadier. I had moved temporarily to Austin to stay closer to Rebecca while legal matters finalized. My strength returned gradually. 3 meals a day, regular walks in the warm Texas evenings, and the simple comfort of opening a refrigerator without hesitation restored more than weight. They restored clarity. It was Rebecca who first suggested sharing my story publicly. We were sitting at her kitchen table one Sunday afternoon when she mentioned that a reporter from the Houston Chronicle often covered elder financial exploitation cases. I felt an immediate tightening in my chest. I had spent my entire professional life valuing privacy and discretion. The idea of strangers reading about my vulnerability felt unbearable. I told her I did not want my neighbors whispering or former colleagues questioning how I could have allowed this to happen. Shame lingered beneath my recovery. Being deceived by someone inside my own family felt like a personal failure. Rebecca listened without interrupting. Then she said something simple but firm. Silence protects the wrong person. She reminded me how easily I had doubted myself, how long I had explained away warning signs. If another woman recognized those patterns earlier because of my story, perhaps the humiliation would serve a purpose. A week later, I met the journalist at a quiet coffee shop in Houston. She did not arrive with a camera or dramatic questions. She asked about small details instead: the thermostat, the locked freezer, the missing passwords. I spoke steadily, focusing on facts rather than anger. I described how financial control often begins under the guise of help. I explained how physical decline can be dismissed as aging until it is nearly too late. When the article was published, I avoided reading it at first. Rebecca showed me the headline on her phone. My name was included, along with a photograph taken in her backyard. I looked stronger in the image than I felt during the events it described. The response came quickly. Messages arrived from acquaintances I had not spoken to in years. Some expressed sympathy. Others confessed they had noticed changes in my appearance, but assumed everything was under control. A few elderly women wrote privately, describing similar situations with relatives managing their accounts. 3 families contacted my attorney within days after recognizing parallels to their own circumstances. The fundraising platform eventually reversed the donations collected under false pretenses and issued refunds to contributors. That action felt less like restitution and more like acknowledgement that deception had been exposed publicly. As the days passed, the shame I had carried began to shift. Speaking openly did not weaken me. It clarified the truth. I realized that what had embarrassed me most was not the financial loss, but the quiet way I had questioned my own judgment. Rebecca watched the change carefully. She reminded me to rest when interviews requested more details than I was ready to give. She never pushed me to become something larger than I felt capable of being. Yet I could sense her pride when I spoke without hesitation about warning signs and boundaries. Silence had nearly cost me my independence. Breaking it did not erase what happened, but it ensured the story would not belong solely to those who had tried to control it. For the first time since the trial, I felt not just protected, but purposeful. If you are still here and you believe silence can be just as dangerous as betrayal, comment number 8 below. The final chapter is not about revenge, but about what I chose to build from the ashes. Let us move on to the conclusion. By the time I turned 72, the sharp edges of the trial had softened into something steadier. Not forgotten, but integrated. My strength had returned slowly, almost quietly. The numbers on the scale no longer startled me. I could walk several blocks without fatigue. I no longer woke in the night feeling chilled to the bone. I made the decision to leave Sugarland for good. Though the legal transfer of my home had been reversed, the walls carried too many memories, layered with suspicion. Rebecca helped me sort through decades of photographs and documents. Closing the door for the last time did not feel like defeat. It felt like completion. Austin suited me better than I expected. Rebecca's neighborhood was lively but calm, filled with oak trees and morning joggers. I purchased a smaller home close to her hospital, one that required no stairs and no compromise of independence. The thermostat remained accessible. The refrigerator remained open. Small freedoms regained meaning. With guidance from my attorney and a financial planner, I placed my assets into an irrevocable trust. Professional oversight replaced informal family management. After restitution and careful investment adjustments, my estate stabilized at approximately $3.1 million. I reviewed every line of the documents personally. Clarity became a discipline. Estate planning required choices that once would have felt unthinkable. 40% of my estate would go to Rebecca. Another 40% would fund a senior protection foundation established in my name, dedicated to providing legal assistance and financial literacy education to older adults. The remaining 20% would be reserved for Daniel, conditional upon 5 years of sustained accountability and demonstrated change. Daniel had begun fulfilling the conditions I set. He completed his volunteer hours at a senior support center in Houston, assisting elderly clients with navigating benefit forms and basic financial safeguards. He attended counseling sessions regularly. Our conversations remained measured, neither warm nor hostile. Trust was not restored, but it was no longer dismissed as impossible. Lauren continued serving her sentence. Her conviction for fraud followed her record permanently. I did not dwell on her circumstances. Justice had been served through lawful channels. My responsibility was no longer to her. What surprised me most was how my identity shifted. For months, I had been described as a victim of financial exploitation. Gradually, that label lost its hold. I was not defined by the years I lost, but by the boundaries I rebuilt. My mornings were structured around simple routines: coffee by the window, light stretching, reviewing correspondence for the foundation. Occasionally, I received letters from women who had recognized early warning signs in their own homes and taken action. Those letters carried more weight than any verdict. Peace did not arrive with celebration. It arrived in ordinary details: warm air circulating freely through my house, groceries purchased without explanation, a bank statement I understood entirely because I reviewed it myself. At 72, I no longer measured security by the size of my pension or the value of my estate. I measured it by autonomy, the freedom to decide, to question, to say no. Rebuilding did not erase what happened. It ensured that what happened would never repeat itself. At 72, I understand now that what I lost was never just money. $8,000 a month had continued to arrive on schedule, even when I was wearing 3 sweaters inside my own home. The pension was steady. What was not steady was my control over it. I did not starve because I lacked resources. I starved because I surrendered access. The deepest wound was not financial. It was the slow erosion of autonomy. Each small decision I allowed someone else to make on my behalf seemed harmless at first. Paying a bill, adjusting the thermostat, buying groceries, convenience disguised itself as care. I confused relief with safety. The betrayal hurt most because it came from within my own family. I had trusted Daniel to question anything that felt wrong. Instead, he chose quiet comfort over confrontation. I have learned that manipulation may influence a person, but it does not eliminate responsibility. Silence is still a decision. If I could speak directly to other women my age, I would tell them this: keep your financial literacy active. Do not hand over passwords simply because someone younger appears more technologically fluent. Maintain independent access to your accounts. Review your statements. Ask questions without apology. Aging does not erase competence. It does not require surrender. And to adult children, I would say something equally direct. Pay attention to small changes. Notice when a parent loses weight quickly or stops attending familiar gatherings. Ask gently, but ask persistently. Discomfort is not disrespect. It can be protection. Justice did not give me back the months I spent doubting myself. It did not restore the naive trust I once carried. What it restored was my voice. Sitting in that courtroom, hearing the evidence read aloud, I realized the system was not punishing for revenge. It was drawing a boundary that had been ignored in my own living room. The transformation was not dramatic. It was deliberate. I began reading every document before signing it. I met with advisors face to face. I rebuilt routines that required my participation. I stopped apologizing for asking questions. Today, my home is warm because I adjust the temperature myself. My refrigerator is stocked because I choose what to buy. My bank statements arrive in my email, and I review each line carefully. These are ordinary actions, but they represent reclaimed authority. I once believed security meant having enough saved for retirement. Now, I know it means retaining the power to decide how that money is used. My pension remains $8,000 each month, but my real wealth is something quieter. It is the knowledge that my voice, once nearly silenced, now belongs entirely to me. Security is not measured by the size of a pension or the balance in a bank account. It is measured by the freedom to make your own decisions without fear, without pressure, and without surrendering your voice. Trust is a beautiful thing, but trust without awareness can quietly become vulnerability. Aging does not diminish wisdom. It does not cancel experience. And it certainly does not require giving away control in exchange for convenience. Sometimes justice is not loud. It does not arrive with celebration. It arrives in small, steady ways, in restored boundaries, in clarity, in the courage to ask questions. Pain can either silence us or sharpen us. The difference lies in whether we choose to remain quiet. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and follow for more stories about resilience, dignity, and reclaiming what matters most.